to the thingy, then we'll be good, because these people can hear me out here. Oh, messing with our stuff! Alright. Are we good? We good to go? Genesis 11, if you're curious, Genesis 11, we are going to be finishing up Genesis 11. If you can believe it, this is like our 7th week in the book of Genesis, and we will hopefully be through chapter 11. Maybe even we got a little bit into chapter 12 during early bird. So maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. I don't know. It depends on how much you buy out of this talk that we're going to have. I will tell you that this is one of those lessons that I was a little bit worried about, just because it's a little bit weird. I would be surprised, unless I've forced you to listen to the Baymaw podcast before, I would be surprised if you have really dissected this passage of text before. But that's what we're going to do. We are going to see how much fun we can have in genealogies. I knew you'd be so excited. So we are going to dissect that a little bit. We are going to hopefully get a bit more into the story of Abram or Avram, and a little bit about what makes him special. And also, we're going to try and answer the question tonight, why did God call specifically Abraham? Come on in, guys. We're going to, since you're late, you get to answer the question, why did God call Abraham? Or Abram, Avram. Okay, yes, yeah, because he just happened to be there on speed dial. Yeah, okay, I like it. All right, what's the usual answer? What makes Abram so special?
He did things that pleased God.
Okay, so he did things that pleased God. What else? What makes Abram so special? What's the usual answer? Oh, sweet Moses. What was the... His faith, there you go. All right, yes, his faith. Usually when we think of Abraham, we think of this man of great faith, and that is absolutely 100% true. He was a man of great faith. But I am going to say that God called Abram for a reason, not just because of what he thought he could do, but for the man he already was. And can you have great faith if you are not a man of God yet? That's a question we're going to ask and hopefully see what we can come up with. This lesson is entitled Buried in a Genealogy, Finding the Why Behind Abraham's Call. All right, so we are going to look a little bit about that. Keep your minds open. I will tell you that the 4:30 class was eating it up, so it's apparently not too out there for people to buy. So I've got a lot of good biblical stuff. Like I said in 4:30, we've talked about some crazy things up until this point, and probably one of the hitching points was like the Noah story, when we talked about what might have happened in the tent. And I kind of told you that's like, I have my favorite theory, but none of them I would just completely say are 100% true. I would never die on any of those hills. So whatever you think is fine by me. What we're going to talk about tonight is I am probably like 95% bought in. So if I don't convince you, I'll be very sad. And if you don't believe me, you're dead to me. But that's okay. Because anyway, I'm just kidding. You don't have to buy what we're talking about. But this is one of those times where I'm like, I am almost positive that the Hebrew, the rabbis that have dissected this passage, they're really onto something. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes they're a little too crazy for me. This time, I'm pretty sure they are on to something pretty cool. Some discussion questions before we get started. If you had to pick a name for yourself that described your personality, what would it be? Or if you had a name, if you could have named yourself coming out of the womb, what would you have named yourself? Assuming you could talk. Thor? yes, yeah. So something with a little bit more gravitas, okay? Yes, yeah. Okay, so Thor, Blackhawk, yeah. Kenneth, okay, yeah. I'm glad somebody does. Just kidding. That's great. I'm glad you like your name. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else wish they had a different name? It doesn't have to mean anything, but like.
As a child, I always wanted to be named Eric.
Eric?
Yep. It's a
What?
video game character I like to learn.
Oh, okay. Yes, yeah. Okay, so maybe named after. Yeah. Okay. Uh-oh. See, your father's in the room, and now you want to change your name. Now's the time. Let's get some family history out. Oh, Declan, what'd you?
I don't know, video game character. It's Boss Faramis.
You wish your name was Boss Faramis.
It has gravitas. It's cool.
Okay, yes, yeah, it has a certain oomph to it.
I'll
Yes,
follow
yeah.
you anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. No one would forget your name, for sure. Yeah, okay.
I could have a giant frisbee hat.
Right, yeah. Okay, all right, yeah. Growing up, were you and your siblings more of one mind, like working together to solve problems, or were you more like a competitive debate team? Okay, yeah, that's what somebody said in Early Bird. It's like, I think debate is a little too soft of a term for what we were doing. Anyway, does anyone have like a sibling that they're like actually like pretty melded together with?
Yeah, I had my little sister and I very close.
Very connected.
And while we had our fights and stuff, we were always working together to do something.
Yes, yeah, okay, good, okay, yeah, so, yeah, not like a completely harmonious relationship, but yeah, like close, like of one mind, yeah. Anyone else have like a
I
Yeah.
never really understood the concept of house sister when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I started with my full sister, but it took over a long time. We got really close to it.
Okay, yeah, that's
We're still
good.
working on our
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah.
I'm really close to my oldest sister.
Okay, yeah, close to you. So for me, my brother is 6 years older than me, and so we always kind of had to get along because if we fought, it was always his fault. Like, it's like, you're 6 years older than me, and I'm the precious baby from above. Like, you can't be mean to me. So we're still pretty in sync together, but it comes from like, we couldn't really fight because it would be his fault. When you read a book or watch a movie, are you a skimmer or are you a dweller? Dweller? Okay.
I save candy specifically for whenever I read.
You
I
can't.
save chocolates. Like,
Oh.
reading because I want that's my me time.
Yes, okay, yeah, so you want to absorb it. Yeah, like every word is precious. Okay, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
It depends
Anyway.
on what I'm reading.
Okay, yes, yeah, there you go. Okay.
There are certain things that I read and I'm ready to turn the page and Misty's like, what are you doing?
Right, yeah,
She's
okay.
absorbing every word and I'm like, yeah, I got that.
Right, yes, yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I just reread sections because I completely forgot what I just read.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
yes, yeah. See, I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I usually read pretty fast, but I'll reread stuff. Like, it's like I can dwell on it that way, where I'll go back and revisit it. Anyone like just an absolute skimmer? Like, I do that a lot with movies. Like, I'll be watching it, but then I'll also be looking up the actors on Wikipedia and be like, oh my word, they've been divorced 3 times. Yeah. So, I don't know why that interests me so much, but I will miss part of the story because I'm too busy with like, wow, they have 4 kids. Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, I won't say the actress's name, but I ended up doing that show Gotham. I don't know if you guys ever watched Gotham. Okay, so one of the actresses on that show, I did the same thing, ended up knowing that she ended up leaving her husband for one of the actors on the show because I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know what the show's about.
Right, yes, yeah, but I do know that they are together right now. Yes, yeah,
Somebody's mad.
Right, yes, yeah, it's crazy that they can still work together. Yeah, yeah. I found that out. Anyone watch Wicked? No musical fans? Okay, yeah. Matthew, of course, yeah, he's a big Wicked fan. I didn't know that, like, the guy that turns into the Tin Man and Ariana Grande, like, were like, what? He is really weird looking. Anyway. I've seen that, and I actually watched the musical version of SpongeBob because he was in it. It's okay. He's a good singer. Probably iffy person, but a good singer. All right. We are going to go ahead and dive into the text. We will be in Genesis chapter 11. Like I said, we are going to see how much fun we can have with genealogies, but I will let you know that we are going to skip like the really, really genealogy part of this genealogy. But I do want to make you aware of how, whenever you're reading genealogies, kind of like how you can make them a little bit more interesting and what is the purpose of the genealogy. So first off, in Hebrew culture, your past was incredibly important to who you were now. Remember, like every time you read the prophets or read even in Exodus and things like that, there's always reminders of where they have been before, okay? Many times the Exodus is going to be like the crucial point of like, remember the Exodus, remember who you have been. And the way to remember who you have been is through genealogies. And a lot of times when we read genealogies, they have very, very similar structures. Where the guy, so for instance, in verse 10 of chapter 11, we have Shem. These are the generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arpachshad 2 years after the flood, and Shem lived after he fathered Arpachshad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. And that's how it goes, is like, okay, then Arpachshad lived 35 years, he had his firstborn, then he lived 403 years after that and had other sons and daughters. And that's the rhythm of genealogies. What I want you to think about when you think of genealogies is the rhythm, okay? There's a rhythm. So-and-so fathered so-and-so, then lived however long, had other sons and daughters, and then his firstborn did this, okay? So there's the rhythm. What's interesting about genealogies is what you want to look for is the break in the rhythm. All right, that's what makes them important. So for instance, in some of the genealogies we skipped, we already talked about some of these characters, but there's a break in the rhythm of some of the genealogies. Anyone want to throw out an example of the break in a rhythm of a genealogy? Anyone remember some? Yeah, after the flood. Okay, so there's a huge break in all the genealogies flood years. Okay, so after the flood, before the flood, that's a break in the rhythm. Before the flood, we have a couple different examples of a break in the rhythm. We have Enoch. Why is he a break in the rhythm? He doesn't die, and he's described as walking with God. So automatically we have this red flag of, whoa, that's different than everybody else, so we need to hone in on this. Noah is actually also a break in the rhythm because he has a little prophecy after his name about what he is going to do. In fact, we learned that was the middle of the chiasm of the preface, is chapter 8, verse 3. Noah is the comforter. He is supposed to provide rest. All right, so we learned that throughout the entire preface, Genesis 1 through 10 is all about who you are as an image bearer of God, and that it's not about what you can produce and about what you do, but about just who you are as an image bearer. So we have this genealogy, and there's a rhythm, like we should expect, and it's a very similar rhythm until we get to verse 27. Verse 26 is, when Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So the break in the rhythm is that, first off, it mentions 3 children that Terah has. Everybody else, it's the firstborn. Terah has 3 children, and keep in mind, as we learned when we talked about Ham, Shem, and Japheth, is that the order in which they are named is not necessarily their birth order, but their importance order, okay? I know that sounds mean to say. It's like, actually, Abram was more important than everybody else. But for our purposes, Abram is more important, so he is named first. Almost certainly, he is not the firstborn, which is interesting. But he is named first. Just like when we looked at Ham, Shem, and Japheth, their orders actually switch around based on what story you're talking about, is who's first is the main character of that particular story. So we have this guy named Terah. He has 3 sons, and that's where we're going to pick up. Verse 27, now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans, and Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and Ishka. Now Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. All right, let's talk about our normal questions. What's weird, what doesn't make sense, and what repeats itself? Very small little passage, so we can probably get some pretty good juice. Gross, right? Okay, yes, yeah. All right, so we have the ick factor. All right, so Nahor marries what we can only assume is his niece. Gross. What else? Who is Ishka? Mentioned once, and I will give you a hint, never, ever mentioned again. And I don't just mean in the genealogy, I mean in the Bible. Never mentioned again. So, who is she? All right. What else? What else is weird? Okay, so in twice. And it's weirdly twice. Like, she is barren, she had no child. Okay, it's like, yes, we're aware what barren means. So what it seems like they really want to emphasize that Sarai is barren and has no child. Okay, what else is weird? No, so you're picking up on something that's kind of weird, is that whenever Haran is mentioned, it also mentions his son right off the bat. Terah had 3 sons, Nahor, Abram, and Haran fathered Lot. Okay, so Lot seems to be important. All right, what else is weird?
That they set forth and left.
Yeah, okay, so they moved, all right? So, yeah, Tehran says, let's pack up and let's move for no other reason than I want to. Okay, what else? Anything else?
They didn't make their destination, they stopped halfway there.
Yes, yeah, okay, so they stopped, yep. Anything else that jumps out at you? Okay, so they settled, all right, so they were mobile and not anymore, okay. Anything else? Yeah, okay, so there's a weird break where it's like you get the rhythm of the genealogy in verse 10 through 26, and then verse 27 sprinkles a little bit of a story time in there. Okay, so it's still a genealogy, but kind of different. It doesn't follow the rhythm that we're used to. Okay. All of these are excellent observations, and all of these mean that this section of Scripture is probably important. Probably something that we should look at. A lot of times when we think about Abram's story, we like to skip to chapter 12 immediately and go straight to his call. That God called him to go and he went. Abram is mentioned before that. And so we need to take a look at what made him who he is before chapter 12. And I think we're going to get a little bit more information than we usually think of in chapter 11 about who Abram was as a person. Now, to help us out here, this is what I have to do with family trees and genealogies. So we have Big Papa right here. He would be called the patriarch, the Terah. He is Terah, and he has 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. All right, what happens to Haran? Crokesville. All right, he dies early, and he leaves his son Lot. All right. So, who else does he leave? His daughters. It kind of sounds like anyway, daughters, who are Ishka and Milcah. Okay, yes, that's right. all names that you should consider for your daughters, Ishka and Milka. All right. So, whenever we have something like this happen in the ancient world, we have a couple of different options. We're going to go through a little bit of history here, but in ancient Near East history, whenever you have what we would call displaced daughters or displaced women, you have a couple of different things that you can do with them. First off, you can go the religious path. Anyone fan of like watching like Middle Ages shows or like Middle Age books? Yeah. So sometimes the parents will be like, my daughter just can't settle down. I'm going to send her to a convent. She's going to be a nun for the rest of her life. And sometimes we like to laugh at that, but that was a real thing that people would do with especially daughters or women that they didn't know what to do with. In the ancient Near East world, we don't have Christianity, so they can't be sent to go be nuns, but they can be sent to go be priestesses. In fact, whenever we in Greece, this happened a lot. All of the temples to especially like gods like or goddesses like Artemis and Aphrodite were all manned by women, and usually these women will be displaced. They would be sent to the convent because we don't know what else to do with you. So there's option number one. Option number two is that you can try to step in as the father figure and marry them off and make alliances and gain reputation and gain wealth. You can do that too. Go ahead and just try and have them live a normal life. The only problem is that this is going to probably cost you something because to make it, depending on what tradition you're going to hold, sometimes the woman had to have like a dowry that she would bring in with her marriage. And if the father did not provide for that, then that meant you did. So that sometimes can cost you something, but you gain, alliances with other clans, maybe some reputation if you marry or if you can get her to marry above her station, things like that. Or you could take them as wards for a time, being their guardian. This usually means that they were younger, and so you can kind of become their adopted surrogate guardian type thing. They would live with you. You would basically become kind of that parent role for them. And then hopefully that would lead to option number 2 as well. So if you took route number 3, you also could, that doesn't disclose, or that doesn't mean you couldn't do option number 2. Wow. Whew. Okay. What happens with at least Milka? What do we know what happens with Milka? Yeah, who? Her uncle. Okay, so secret option number 4. All right, gross option. Now, to our Western ears, it's going to sound gross that an uncle was marrying her niece. This doesn't make it not gross, but just keep in mind there are some calculations of ages here that we can do because this family is actually mentioned in Acts, and ages are actually specified in the book of Acts. And so if you do some math here, anyone like an uncle or an aunt to someone who's like older than you or like your same age? Yeah, okay. We have kind of that going on here, is that like, once again, not trying to defend it or saying it's perfectly fine because they were the same age, but they were probably similar. It's not like a 90-year-old marrying a 12-year-old or anything. They were probably a little bit closer in age. However, in Hebrew culture, once again, families were very, very intertwined. For lack of a better term, even in Levitical structure, you kept it in the family. If your brother passed, you, as their brother, became responsible for their family. Not just their children, but if they left a widow behind, you became responsible for your brother's family. This is almost certainly the tradition that we're operating under, where Haran is dead. I meant Nahor. Nahor is probably operating under the impression that I take care of my brother's family. And rather than sending her away, or her becoming a ward, or going to be a priestess. I am instead going to go above and beyond and keep her in the family, not just as a hanger-on, but as an important part of the family. I'm going to make her my wife, elevating her to a status that she could not get otherwise. So she gets to stay in her clan, and this has a couple of different. We're going to take the approach that Haran is doing something good. There are some selfish ways you can take this. One being that historically, in a lot of noble families, they would keep it in the family, but for different reasons. Anyone want to guess what reasons they might have to keep it in the family? Yeah, if they were loaded, they didn't like the idea of their inheritance going to another clan. So they would marry cousins, nieces, nephews, sometimes brothers, sisters. Even though it sounds gross to us, it wasn't, as it was explained to me, it wasn't common, but it wasn't uncommon. Like, no one would be like, woo! But it's not like the first option either. You know, kind of understand what I'm saying? But this is a real, in Hebrew culture at least, or at least in the Genesis time, we see this actually a lot. So we have Nahor, and he has descendants. Anyone remember who some of his notable descendants are? By the name of Laban, a girl by the name of Rebecca, who marries the other side. So when Abram is looking for a wife for Isaac, he doesn't go to the Chaldeans. He doesn't go anywhere else. He says, my brother has some family around here. Let's go check them out. So it's not, in the Bible, you see this a lot, is just kind of this intermarriage of, they were cousins, so it's not as weird, but this is kind of weird. Anyway, so you have Nahor marrying his niece, and we're going to look at that as a good thing because he's trying to take care of someone who is vulnerable and who would not have a good life otherwise, more than likely. Okay? So what happens to Ishka? But we don't really know. Something weird about this genealogy is that, first of all, we have a disappearing family member. Everybody else has a story told about them, or at least we know what happened to him, other than Ishka. Who comes out of nowhere in this genealogy?
Sarah.
Yeah, what's her deal? Who's her dad? Who's her mom? Right? No idea. So Ishka doesn't have a future, and Sarah doesn't have a past. These are two people we want to keep an eye on then, because they're different than everybody else in the genealogy. And when I say two people, I'm being a little facetious. In Genesis 11:29, it mentions Iscah, daughter of Haran, who then disappears. Ancient Jewish Midrash identifies Ishka as Sarai, as the same person. I see all the faces, and I know some of the objections, and we're going to talk about them, so don't get your panties in a wad, because both names, there's a naming pattern here. Both names mean princess. What is really interesting is that Ishka means the princess, and Sarai means my princess, so kind of fun. So they're both named princess. Ishka means to see or behold, possibly indicating that she was a prophetess. This could lend meaning to why God tells Abram to do whatever Sarai says regarding Hagar, is because she had some religious authority behind her. And so if Ishka and Sarai are the same person, it could mean that Sarai was also kind of this prophetess that could see or behold. But probably the biggest feather in this cap would be that Abram and Nahor protect Haran's orphans. Both of them are doing something. Haran is protecting Milcah. But what makes Abram's sacrifice even greater? If this is true, what makes Abram's sacrifice almost monumental?
He wasn't guaranteed any children.
What do we know about Sarai?
She's barren
She's barren
and has no child.
and has no child. It tells us that twice. My theory is because, not mine, other people's theory is that because this is a fact that they really want you to know, is that Sarai is barren. So when Abram takes her as his wife, he is basically sacrificing his legacy. So if you're looking at the family tree, this is kind of what it would look like if Ishka and Sarai are the same person. Haran has Lot over here. He has Milcah who marries Nahor, and then Ishka is Sarai who marries Abram. Okay? Does that make sense so far? Everyone kind of following my train of thought at least?
I like that.
Okay, yeah. You kind of like the theory. Yes, yeah. But I can tell that some of you are not buying it. And here we go. Yeah. Jennifer. That's okay. That it would be too easy if you bought it right now. The importance, why I like this theory, before I get into why I believe it so much, is that first of all, Sarai was an orphaned woman with no dowry or social standing. In the ancient Near East, lineage was everything, and she had no future to offer. Now, Sarai was barren. By marrying her, Abram chose to let his name die out of care for his brother's daughter. Abram was sacrificing his future to care for his brother's family. That's huge. He gave up his own name so that he could take care of someone vulnerable whom he loved. He wasn't afraid, and he wasn't building it for himself. As we walk through Abram's life, I want us to try and figure out what cure is he to some diseases we saw in Genesis 1 through 11. What solution is he to the story problems that we have in Genesis 1 through 11? Just by not having the fear of needing to make a name for himself and to sacrifice for the vulnerable, who is he the opposite of? Who operated out of fear probably the most in our stories? Cain. I'm going to say that this is a complete 180 from our boy Cain. Now, and I'm surprised you guys haven't yelled at me about this, because in 4:30, this was the very first thing they wanted to yell about, was in the genealogy, it says that she was barren, she had no child. And the big question is, well, how do they know she was barren?
I was about to say, but I knew you'd get to it.
Yeah, exactly. You trusted me. They did not at all. Right, yeah, no. Feel free. If you have questions, you should be like, hey, Garrett, you're missing something. And I'll be like, oh, wait just a minute. Or I'll be like, ooh, that's a good one. So, two kind of options historically about what might have happened to our girl Sarai. First off, she might have been married before, but then returned because of infertility. In ancient Near East culture, if you married a woman and it was determined that she was infertile, that was grounds to dissolve the marriage and return her back to her family. So, ouch. Yeah.
So I was thinking, and because it says she had no child, my thought on the returned wife has been that she was married and possibly widowed.
Maybe.
Because some women can become barren after having a child.
Okay,
So it
yeah.
didn't just mention that she was barren. They said barren and had no child, as though the relationship she was in didn't produce a child.
And perhaps that's a way to read that. I considered that way to read it. That's an interesting take. I like that. Because my take on it is that this is probably the theory that I lean towards the most, is because it also informs the name change. She might have been married and her husband called her something different, and then she returned with that name. It's possible. One person asked in 430, how did they know that it was her? You know, infertility can go both ways. Not in ancient Near East culture. It is never the man's fault if the woman is infertile, by the way. No, it would have almost certainly been seen, even if it wasn't. We actually find that she is the one that is infertile. But even if she wasn't, it's her. It can't be the guy. It's her. So very possible that she was married before and was returned because of her infertility, and that's how they know that she is barren. The other option is that while this seems really, really a violation of personal information for us Westerners, it would not have been that uncommon in the Eastern tradition. Remember, you have a lot of family members living in what would be considered a studio apartment in today's society. And so they were very, very close and knew a lot about each other. It is very possible that the community might have known of a health affliction that could have caused it beforehand. I don't want to get too graphic here, and I'm not a woman, but like cycle problems. And that would have been something that the community probably would have known about. And so it's possible that she has not been married before, and they just know from a health affliction that she cannot produce children. Two options there. You can also believe that they didn't know she was barren until she married Abram. I think that cheapens the sacrifice he makes a little bit, and I think it would be weird because the genealogy seems to really hammer home that everybody knew about it. But once again, it doesn't say specifically, so you can kind of take your guesses there. But also, grammatically speaking, we have some things going on here. We are missing in the Hebrew. In the English, it's hard to catch because they actually try and correct the Hebrew a little bit. And I despise when Bible translations do this. In fact, we have another example of when they try to correct, and it actually steals a lot of the meaning of a story. But in any case, we have a missing plural here. It says that Abram and Nahor took wives. In the Hebrew, it says Nahor and Abram took wives. He married Sarai and Milcah. He, a singular. When the Hebrew does this, this means they are of one mind. They are going to do something together. Okay? We've actually come across this before. We didn't talk about this little Hebrew hitch in the grammar because it wasn't super relevant for our purposes whenever we were talking about it. But Shem and Japheth have a similar thing happen. It says they took a blanket and he covered Noah. Okay? So when that singular is there, they are of one purpose, one mind. Just as the brothers acted as one to cover Noah's shame, Abram and Nahor acted as one to cover the loss of their brother's family. The singular verb, I'm not even going to try, unites them there. So, see there, he took, and he took. God looks for those who know how to be one with their brothers in the work of healing. Okay? So we have this mirror here again of Nahor and Abram becoming kind of this new Shem and Japheth. They are both one covering someone who is in a vulnerable state. So my whole thing about going through that is it would be weird if the Hebrew read they are of one mind and going to do this for their brother, and then they send Ishka away and Abram marries someone else. That'd be weird. And a lot of rabbis are going to say that would be weird. That must not be what's going on. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says Abram was completing a journey his father Terah started. He was a model parent who understood continuity. Rabbi Rashi says the name Ishka proves Sarai was a prophetess, Abram's spiritual partner from the beginning. The historian Josephus actually says he confirms the family unity to protect Haran's legacy after his tragic death. Josephus actually speaks about Ishka and Sarai as if they are the same person and as if that is common knowledge among the community. So this is not like some crazy brand new idea. This has been an idea that has been around in at least Jewish circles for a long, long time. Josephus, remember, was a historian who wrote in the Roman era, so very quickly after Jesus' death. So this idea has been around for at least 2,000 years, and 2,000 years ago probably was accepted as common knowledge. We have just lost that with our Gentile readings. Babel versus Abraham. Here we have another cure to another story that we've been talking about. Why did they build the Tower of Babel? What was their goal? Yeah, they said that's what they wanted, but what was their? Why did they specifically say we are going to build this tower in order to make a name for ourselves, make our name great? Here we see Babel trying to make their name great by seeking self-glory. Here we see a guy giving up the possibility of making a name for himself to protect someone who's vulnerable. Remember the bricks and stone conversation we had? They ignored the vulnerable to continue progress. Abram puts progress completely on hold to save orphans. The great name, Genesis 12:2, the great name that God gives Abram in Genesis 12:2 was a gift because Abram refused to make one for himself. This is the ultimate act of someone trusting the story, saying, I don't care so much about my own progress, my own name, but instead am going to give it up in turn for someone else. But Garrett, you might say, Abram calls Sarai his sister in Genesis 12:19. So we just spent 45 minutes talking about nonsense because the Bible contradicts you, my friend. First off, a couple of historical things that we need to be made aware of. First off, there are vertical family relationships and horizontal family relationships. The vertical family relationships go something like this. Usually whenever a king dies, he is buried with his who? His fathers. Yes, yeah. Are they literally all his father? No. They're his father. They're his grandfather. There's his great-grandfather, great-grandfather. That's a vertical familial relationship. In ancient Near East culture, you don't really call someone your grandpa. You call someone father. And you can have a lot of fathers, depending on how big your family is. You might even call your uncle father, okay, because he's one generation up from you. And so you'd have a lot of fathers, you'd have a lot of mothers. Horizontal family relationships, remember we have a lot of family members living in the same place. And the best way I can describe it is that if you go to a family reunion and you see someone who's your sixth cousin twice removed from your great aunt's dog, what do you call them? Cuz. Right. Yeah, you should call them cuz because you don't know how you're related, but you know there's blood there somewhere. In ancient Near East culture, they didn't really have a word for cousin. They had brother and sister. And so it didn't matter how far removed you were from each other. You could be third cousins, fourth cousins, whatever. You were still brother and sister. Okay? So whenever they talked about this, they called each other brother and sister, even if they were necessarily niece and nephew. Remember how I talked about you might call your uncle father? Who is Lot in place of now? Who's dead? Haran. Okay, so he moves up and is now brother. So in Genesis 13:8, this is where I get really, really picky about my biblical translations, because a lot of Bible translations want to correct the Hebrew, and that messes things up. Because a lot of your translations are going to say that Abram calls, we are close relatives, we are kinsmen. Now, does that sound very Hebrew to you? You're my close relative, why are we fighting? No, that's not the Hebrew. He calls him brother. But since the translators think they're so much smarter than the original writers, they were like, well, he's not really his brother, so that must be wrong. It's not wrong. And it actually takes away a little bit of the effect of the story. Because, so Genesis 13:8, they're deciding which way to go. The families are too big and they're fighting. And anyone remember where they're arguing?
At the well?
No. I like where your head's at. It's a general. It's general. It's not like they were arguing in Minnesota. It was a place. Yes, Canaan in a field. Yeah, okay. Two brothers arguing in a field. What does that sound like? Oh, that one ends poorly. This one is the cure, is the way it's supposed to happen. But whenever the translators take out brother, you don't make that connection as easy. So that's my angry tirade against the NIV today.
Also, in 19, you also have kind of the play on words with the Egyptians.
Yes, yeah.
Because he does call her sister,
Right.
and so they're thinking sister.
Right, yes, yeah.
And he's saying sister because she's the female relative.
Yes.
Horizontally.
Right.
So technically, he wasn't lying.
Right. It was the deceitful truth. Abraham would have been a great lawyer. Now, here's what I want us to get from why this might be important. Why Ishka and Sarai being the same woman might be important. God didn't choose Abram randomly. Abram passed the brother's keeper test that Cain failed. Abram was practicing fatherhood before he had a child and faithfulness before he had a call. Character is what we do when only the genealogy is watching. Isn't that fun? Yeah, that's what you're going to use from now on. God didn't choose Abram because of who he thought he was going to be. God chose Abram because of who he already was. A guy who is willing to give up his future to protect a vulnerable person. In Jewish thought, this is going to be very, very connected to hospitality. And that's why whenever you ask a Gentile why God chose Abram, they're going to say faith. When you ask a Jewish person why God chose Abram, they're going to say hospitality. And that's why hospitality is such a big deal in Jewish culture. And also, we're going to see in later stories why being inhospitable is a huge sin that we usually don't think of as being such a big deal. But in Jewish culture, huge deal, being inhospitable. We're going to talk about that in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, if you can believe it. So I want to move on just a little bit to Genesis 12, 1 through 9. And see if we can get through this text. We're going to start moving a little bit quicker. Going to start cruising through Genesis, try and get through as much as we can. And we're going to use the tools that we've learned so far to try and get a little bit more out of the text than maybe we usually do. Chapter 12, starting in verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran. And they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At the time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give you this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward Negeb. All right, so we have a little bit going on here and some questions to ask. But first I want to give a little bit of historical context of why this is so important. If I am 32 years old, if I were still living in my parents' basement, you would call me a loser. That's right. Yeah, coming straight from the dad. Loser. All right, yeah. So if I was still living in my parents' basement, we would call me a loser. If I was 32 years old and not living with my parents in ancient Near East, I would be called a traitor. You lived with your family until they died. You lived in your parents' house until they were dead, and most likely after they died, you took up their profession. So you lived in the same place year after year, generation after generation after generation, because you just didn't leave the place that your family was. You never left your clan. This is why it's so important that Haran and Abram married Milcah and Ishka. It's because they were keeping them in the clan. You don't have to go anywhere because it's so important that you don't leave your family. This is why even into the Middle Ages, you would have families that said, "I have been here for 7 generations, and my father made horseshoes, my grandfather made horseshoes, my great-grandfather made horseshoes, my son will make horseshoes, and his son after him will make horseshoes, and we will live forever in the village of Kafananapa." It was called a Beidov. Yeah, and that's the family unit. I'm going to use the word clan, but Beidov is the Hebrew version of that. So when God asks Abram to leave, he is not just telling Abram, "I want you to take a risk on this business venture I have in mind for us." He is saying, "I want you to do something that no one else does. I want you to give up security, family reputation, and I want you to go." What's interesting about this is that it seems like Terah at least had a little bit, his father, had a little bit of this spirit, because as we mentioned, he moves. He just doesn't go far enough. And so it seems like God picks Abram as well, because there seems to be this family spirit that isn't afraid to move. Terah just didn't go far enough. Abram goes the whole way. This is an interesting question. Why take Lot?
I guess that's responsibility.
Maybe. Although, I mean, he's actually taking Lot away from the family. So it's almost like he's putting Lot in a sticky situation. Why take Lot? Yes, it really does. And what does God promise Abram in verses 2 and 3? Okay. What do we know that makes that unlikely? Sarah's barren. So why take Lot? Okay, God, I'll take you up on that. In fact, in Hebrew vision, Abram is actually doing something good here. He is making it to where God can fulfill his promise. He knows that it's not going to come from him. But I have this wardship, this guardianship over Lot, and so it'll come from him, obviously, because it can't come from me. So he takes Lot almost certainly with the intention of this is where the great nation is going to come through, is Lot, okay? And I want us to keep that thought in our heads because Abram goes really, really out of his way to take care of Lot. And it kind of, having that thought in our head kind of like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense why he's like so protective of Lot. Once again, we have a connection here to the Tower of Babel. Whenever Abraham, instead of building a tower like that of Babel, he builds an altar. He builds a tower of sorts, but it's not to himself. Instead of making a name for himself, he honors another, that being God. And instead of staying where he built his tower, he continues to be mobile. He moves around. In fact, he builds, and we'll leave with this thought, and he builds another altar at the end of this story. So we have an altar at the beginning, an altar at the end, and if you look at the places, they're going to sound eerily familiar. Do you smell that? Smells like a chiasm to me. But I'll leave you with that because I don't think we're going to have time. Here. We will get into the Egypt story a little bit later. And I think we're pretty hard on Abraham for this story. I think there's a little bit more to it that gives him a little bit more cover. It's still not great, and he still is not the greatest guy. And we actually learned that's like even the heroes can have problems. Anyone remember why they go? Where are they whenever he lies? Egypt. Anyone remember why they go there? There's a famine. And he goes, so anytime we see, and then they went to Egypt, it's bad. Egypt is always bad. Because what does Egypt represent? Oppression, slavery, empire. So when there's a famine and he goes to Egypt, what is that representative of? Yeah. He doesn't trust God. God told you to go, and now it's like, well, now there's a famine. So I'm going to go ahead and head to Egypt. Anyway, let that sink in for a minute, and then we'll go ahead and pray, and we'll see you later. Father, we love you, and we thank you so much for the time that we've had to dig further into your word, to learn more about your character, and to learn more about the people whom you want us to be, and how we can best be used by you, how you look for people who are willing to give up their own name to take on yours, and how they are willing to look after the vulnerable and the orphan and the widow. And we ask that you give us that heart, give us the heart of Abraham, and continue to see that heart play out through the rest of his story. We ask that you continue to bless this study as we go through Genesis. And in Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thanks, guys. There are deacon sheets at Connection Point. If you want to nominate a deacon, all we ask is that you please ask them first. But also, if you're on the texting system, an online form was sent to you today that you can also fill out. Anyway, all right, that's it.